Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of The Longing. Today we are going to be continuing once again to read Aesop's Fables. So, let's get going. The Ass and the Dog. An ass and a dog were on their travels together, and as they went along they found a sealed packet lying on the ground. The ass picked it up, broke the seal, and found it contained some writing, which he proceeded to read out. Proceeded to read out aloud to the dog. As he read on, it turned out to be all about grass and barley and hay. In short, all the kinds of fodder that asses are fond of. The dog was a good deal bored with listening to all this, till at last his impatience got the better of him, and he cried, "Just skip a few pages, friend, and see if there isn't something about meat and bones." The ass glanced all through the packet, but found nothing of the sort, and said so. Then the dog said in disgust, "Oh, throw it away, do. What's the good of a thing like that?" The Ass Carrying the Image. A certain man put an image on the back of his ass to take it to one of the temples of the town. As they went along the road, all the people they met uncovered and bowed their heads out of reverence for the image. But the ass thought they were doing it out of respect for himself, and began to give himself airs accordingly. At last he became so conceited that he imagined he could do as he liked, and, by way of protest against the load he was carrying, he came to a full stop and flatly declined to proceed any further. His driver, finding him so obstinate, hit him hard and long with his stick, saying the while, "Oh, you dunder-headed idiot, do you suppose it's come to this, that men pay worship to an ass? Rude shocks await those who take to themselves the credit that is due to others." The Athenian and the Theban. An Athenian and a Theban were on the road together, and passed the time in conversation, as is the way of travellers. After discussing a variety of subjects, they began to talk about heroes, a topic that tends to be more fertile than edifying. Each of them was lavish in his praises of the heroes of his own city, until eventually the Theban asserted that Hercules was the greatest hero who had ever lived on earth, and now occupied a foremost place among the gods, while the Athenian insisted that Theseus was far superior, for his fortune had been in every way supremely blessed, whereas Hercules had at one time been forced to act as a servant. And he gained his point, for he was a very glib fellow, like all Athenians, so that the Theban, who was no match for him in talking, cried at last in some disgust, "All right, have your way. I only hope that when our heroes are angry with us, Athens may suffer from the anger of Hercules, and Thebes only from that of Theseus." The Goatherd and the Goat. A goatherd was one day gathering his flock to return to the fold, when one of his goats strayed and refused to join the rest. He tried for a long time to get her to return by calling and whistling to her, but the goat took no notice of him at all, so at last he threw a stone at her and broke one of her horns. In dismay he begged her not to tell his master, but she replied, "You silly fellow, my horn would cry aloud even if I held my tongue. It's no use trying to hide what can't be hidden." The Sheep and the Dog. Once upon a time the sheep complained to the shepherd about the difference in his treatment of themselves and his dog. "Your conduct," said they, "is very strange, and, we think, very unfair. We provide you with wool and lambs and milk, and you give us nothing but grass, and even that we have to find for ourselves. But you get nothing at all from the dog, and yet you feed him with titbits from your own table." Their remarks were overheard by the dog, who spoke up at once and said, "Yes, and quite right too. Where would you be if it wasn't for me? Thieves would steal you, wolves would eat you. Indeed, if I didn't keep constant watch over you, you would be too terrified even to graze." The sheep were obliged to acknowledge that he spoke the truth, and never again made a grievance of the regard in which he was held by his master. The Shepherd and the Wolf. A shepherd found a wolf's cub straying in the pastures, and took him home and reared him along with his dogs. When the cub grew to his full size, if ever a wolf stole a sheep from the flock, he used to join the dogs in hunting him down. It sometimes happened that the dogs failed to come up with the thief, and, abandoning the pursuit, returned home. The wolf would, on such occasions, continue the chase by himself, and when he overtook the culprit, would stop and share the feast with him, and then return to the shepherd. But if some time passed without a sheep being carried off by the wolves, he would steal one himself, and share his plunder with the dogs. The shepherd's suspicions were aroused, and one day he caught him in the act, and, fastening a rope around his neck, hung him on the nearest tree. What's bred in the bone is sure to come out in the flesh. The lion, Jupiter, and the elephant. The lion, for all his size and strength, and his sharp teeth and claws, is a coward in one thing. He can't bear the sound of a cock crowing, and runs away whenever he hears it. He complained bitterly to Jupiter for making him like that, but Jupiter said it wasn't his fault. He had done the best he could for him, and, considering this was his only failing, he ought to be well content. The lion, however, wouldn't be comforted, and was so ashamed of his timidity that he wished he might die. In this state of mind he met the elephant, and had a talk with him. He noticed that the great beast cocked up his ears all the time, as if he were listening for something, and he asked him why he did so. Just then a gnat came humming by, and the elephant said, "Do you see that wretched little buzzing insect? I'm terribly afraid of its getting into my ear. If it once gets in, I'm dead and done for." The lion's spirits rose at once when he heard this. For, he said to himself, if the elephant, huge as he is afraid of a gnat, I needn't be so much ashamed of being afraid of a cock, who is 10,000 times bigger than a gnat. The pig and the sheep. A pig found his way into a meadow where a flock of sheep were grazing. The shepherd caught him, and was proceeding to carry him off to the butcher's, when he set up a loud squealing, and struggled to get free. The sheep rebuked him for making such a to-do, and said to him, "The shepherd catches us regularly, and drags us off just like that, and we don't make any fuss." "No, I dare say not," replied the pig, "but my case and yours are altogether different. He only wants you for your wool, but he wants me for bacon." The gardener and his dog. A gardener's dog fell into a deep well, from which his master used to draw water for the plants in his garden with a rope and a bucket. Failing to get the dog out by means of these, the gardener went down into the well himself in order to fetch him up. But the dog thought he had come to make sure of drowning him, so he bit his master as soon as he came within reach, and hurt him a good deal, with the result that he left the dog to his fate and climbed out of the well, remarking, "It serves me quite right for trying to save so determined a suicide." The rivers and the sea. Once upon a time, all the rivers combined to protest against the action of the sea in making their waters salt. "When we come to you," said they to the sea, "we are sweet and drinkable, but when once we have mingled with you, our waters become as briny and as unpalatable as your own." The sea replied shortly, "Keep away from me, and you'll remain sweet." The lion in love. A lion fell deeply in love with the daughter of a cottager, and wanted to marry her, but her father was unwilling to give her to so fearsome a husband, and yet didn't want to offend the lion, so he hit upon the following expedient. He went to the lion and said, "I think you will make a very good husband for my daughter, but I cannot consent to your union unless you let me draw your teeth and pare your nails, for my daughter is terribly afraid of them." The lion was so much in love that he readily agreed that this should be done. When once, however, he was thus disarmed, the cottager was afraid of him no longer, but drove him away with his club. The beekeeper. A thief found his way into an apiary when the beekeeper was away, and stole all the honey. When the keeper returned and found the hives empty, he was very much upset, and stood staring at them for some time. Before long the bees came back from gathering honey, and finding their hives overturned, and the keeper standing by, they made for him with their stings. At this he fell into a passion and cried, You ungrateful scoundrels, you let the thief who stole my honey get off scot-free, and then you go and sting me who have always taken such care of you. When you hit back, make sure you have got the right man. And with that, we are going to come to the end of the episode. So, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.